One way is because I believe in what I do. And so one way you get people to get involved is you're like a salesperson. You're selling yourself. You're selling whatever it is that you're about. And so most people understand because I'm serious about what I am. They buy into it. Really, it just take me to ask one conversation. Sometimes you gotta, what would be the word, Father? Like you gotta court them a little bit.
Yeah.
Some people you definitely have to court a little bit to get them to understand the importance of them getting involved. For instance, I was telling you before we even got started that, I have a young lady that I met at an event, and I was sharing about Americans for Prosperity and what we're about, and I was hiring at the time for grassroots associates, and she had never been involved in politics. She had a little podcast or whatever, but
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm your host, David Fromm. So we've been talking for a number of episodes about Americans for Prosperity's One Small Step initiative. This is a campaign where we're talking about the initial steps that individuals take to then embark on a change in their community, in their state, in their nation, mostly in the public policy space. So people getting involved in politics, taking an initial step, and then really having a dramatic impact. This is a story of our founding fathers. We see this reflected all the time. So we're here right now at Americans for Prosperity's all staff meeting, where our hundreds of employees from around the country come together to be inspired, to strategize, to talk about the priorities that we have to make great lasting change for freedom and liberty in this country. And I'm always inspired by so many of the colleagues that I have a chance to meet and interact with and learn from. And one of those is joining us today. Roslyn Williams is just a pillar of our Pennsylvania team in the Philadelphia area, and she got her start maybe initially in Philadelphia, but really got her start in activism down in Georgia. So I'm excited to talk to her about her story. She's just one of the best organizers that we have, and I feel like there's a lot of lessons that we can learn about how to take that initial step, even if someone has some trepidation about it, like how to take that initial step and really start to make a difference in your community. So Roz, thanks for joining us.
Oh, hi, David. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for your kind words. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks. You can pay me later. No, it all very well deserved and then some. Okay. So it's fun. Some of the folks have been watching a bunch of probably saw that we were in Philadelphia just a few months ago.
Yes, January.
The initial kickoff of our America's 250th anniversary celebrations. We've done some others since, and we're going to keep going, which is great. But there's really nowhere better to kick off, the birthplace of democracy here in America.
That's right.
Although now we're sitting in Boston, which is, a pretty close second, or some would say competing for first. I mean, there's so much wonderful history here to remind us about the values that undergird our founding and really gave birth to this nation. So I'm so glad you could join us from Philly.
Thank you.
But I want to talk to you about what was your path to, at one point, being a change agent and someone who's organizing an activist yourself, and now being someone who's really just one of our best in the country at organizing folks. So
thank you.
Maybe take me a little of that journey. Like you lived in Philadelphia, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in Philadelphia. And while I lived in Philadelphia until I was 42 years old, I got married at 42. So ladies, there's always hope. And when my husband and I got married, we moved to Atlanta, Georgia, actually Henry County, but it's considered Metro Atlanta. And when I got to Georgia is when I took a step and got involved in politics. Prior to that, I was a registered Democrat, but I wasn't actually someone that voted all the time, nor did I really care too much about it. I voted if I felt like it. And I would go to the polling locations, and they would just give us a ballot and tell us who to vote for. So without any education or anything, I did what my community does. And well, they don't do that anymore because many have waken up, and you understand. So, but with that said, when I moved to Georgia, I wanted to offer my etiquette program to a young lady that had a dance studio. Mm-hmm. And I've been looking for her, riding past her dance studio, and could never find her. And then one day I saw her and I approached her about teaching my etiquette classes to her little girls. And she was running for office. And she was actually running for county commissioner. It was a Republican county, and no one had ever beat the incumbent that was running at that time. And she happened to be running, first female African-American woman. And she asked me if I would volunteer. After I gave her my spiel, I did land a contract. And she asked me if I would volunteer for her campaign and help her. And I said, yes. I was excited to take that step simply because I just wanted to have some friends. I was new to Georgia. My husband was working. I was a stay-at-home wife. And I was going stir crazy in the house. I didn't have any friends. I didn't know anyone. And coming from my ministry, my church background, I used to always get involved and have women functions. And so I was just excited to get back out there with people. But with that one small step, that one small me saying yes to her and to her campaign, she won.
Yeah.
And she won her election, and it was through the organizing and the galvanizing that I was able to do. Here I was, a stranger in the land, coming from Philly, but I had an untapped skill and gift that I didn't even know I had. And she won her seat. And everyone, like, when she won, no one could believe, like, who in the world, like, how in the world did she do that? And most of them, they understood that it was from this young lady that came from Philly, was able to pull her people together because they didn't know me.
Yeah.
But I was influential enough to get them to come out and to take the necessary steps to help her to win. And from that, David, she made me her chief of staff. She appointed me as her chief of staff. And then when she won, she appointed me to the Henry County Water Authority Board. And I got to sit on that board for 2 years. And so that's how I got my one small step.
Nice. Well, and then you went forward and you worked on some other campaigns.
Oh, yes.
And had a bunch of other experiences. So what were those like, and how'd that lead you back to Philadelphia?
Yes. So from there, because of the victory that this young lady had and the other candidates did not win, the women there in Henry County, they asked me to become the president of the Henry County Democratic Women. And I said yes. I talked it over with my husband, and he said, baby, you should do it. And so I took that step and became the leader in a county where nobody really knew who I was. They only saw what I did for her, but we was able to transform that whole county from 9 women in the Democratic Women to over 100 women. And we built a machine out there. And I remember, I'm an original. I don't like copying off anybody. So instantly I was like, well, we need a name. And so I said Henry County Democratic Women Stepping Up, and created a logo, designed my own logo for us. And it was a shoe with a bunch of steps and showing us stepping up. And I had the different counties, the names of the different counties on each step that we took. It was 4 counties in that in Henry. And the work we did there, taking one small step, we trained others, and now they're leading the county now. One of the young ladies that sat on my board, she's the chairman. And a lot of the other women that served under us, we taught them how to galvanize, because prior to that, they wasn't doing anything but meeting at Perkins and eating food, And I remember, the first time when I got involved and took that step to become their leader, I really recognized that they were playing games, but this was serious to me because my eyes had just become open to the importance of civic engagement. Mm-hmm. You understand? And so prior to Georgia, I did not really understand that. But down there, they're very serious about politics. They're very serious about getting involved in legislation and policy and all that. And me, I just was helping them, put some pieces together. And so when I saw that they were meeting and just having lunch, I said, no more food at our meetings. You understand? I found a place that we were going to have our meetings, and instantly I said we need to start creating events and stuff and bringing other women together. And so, I'm going to just interject this, but I remember the first time, I said we're going to do a breakfast in blue. And they said, when? I said, in 30 days. And they was like, we don't have enough time for that. And I said, oh, we got time. I said, if all y'all sell 5 tickets, we can at least get 25 people there, because I have 5 people on my board. So I just knew they know people. Man, please, none of them sold anything. But because of the one small step that I'm good at taking, which is the ask. The ask is the most important step that anybody could ever take. And so because everywhere I went, I just started reaching out to other women. Every woman that I met, I just reached out to them and I started asking them to come and to join our meeting. And so the day of that event, I had about 50 people there. And guess what? I sold all the tickets.
Wow.
They didn't sell them. And here I was, a stranger in the land, but I realized I had a base and didn't even recognize it. And it was just from taking a step and asking others to join. And so I worked in politics down in Georgia for about five years, because as you said, I started getting jobs as a field organizer, from field to regional. So I worked on pretty much Abrams campaign. A lot of people moved to Charlotte, worked on the Bloomberg campaign. And again, I will say that, the steps that we've taken throughout this process, I've always led in numbers. They used to call me the crusher, because we know how to, get those numbers. And because we're serious, we're ethical.
Mm-hmm. And
so it was when I left my husband, I separated and left my husband in 2021. 2021, I left my husband to go back home to Pennsylvania. And starting my life over. I got a house up there in Pennsylvania, and I needed a job, and I took a job with the Pennsylvania Democratic Party. And the reason I took that job, because they was hiring and I didn't have to have the vaccination.
Mm-hmm.
So let me interject that, because around 2020, when they started, you had to get the vaccine, I wouldn't get it. And so I stopped doing any work because nobody would hire me because I wouldn't get the vaccination. And so when I left and moved back to Philly, and the Democratic Party there didn't require one, I took the job. I was like, well, I got to rebuild my life. But I do want to stop right here and just say real quick that in 2020, I began to question my own values. I wasn't sure, and I didn't really have the passion that I used to have for the Democratic Party, because I realized I didn't align with their values. And let me just say that their values no longer suited who I was and what I believe in. And so, but I just needed the money. This is what I do,
Yeah.
So I took the job, and but I lost that job in January 2022. They fired me for not getting the vaccination.
So eventually caught up. The vaccination
eventually caught up.
became such dogma. It was,
Yes.
I don't know if all of us obviously lived through that time, the COVID era, but to be reminded that how serious it was and how many people lost their jobs just because they didn't take a unvetted vaccine.
Yes.
It's incredible. It was a scary time. I mean,
It is.
Really scary.
And, some people today act like it never occurred, but it did. And it's still going on. It may be subtle in some ways, I think, because a lot of those that put that type of policy in place, implementation, did not expect the pushback that it got, you understand. And it was much more severe than just that the natural eye could see, And so, when they came to me and said I needed to produce a vaccination card, I said, oh, well, y'all got to let me go because I'm not getting it. I won't get it. And you guys are going to have to fire me. And so the human resource guy said, no, just file for a religious exemption because I am a Christian woman. And I did. And I said, well, I'm not going to lose my job. And he said, no, you won't lose your job. But eventually they lied. They pulled me out the field. They said I had 15 days, pulled me out January 15th, said you got to the end of the month to get the vaccine or we're going to terminate you. I said, y'all drag me down dead before I let y'all stick me with anything because I don't want it. And if you guys could fight for a woman to choose to have a right to abort her child, I should be able to say what I want in my body. And so I could not understand that. I could not understand how you could say you got a right to choose one thing, but you can't choose this other thing. And so I took one small step and I left the Democratic Party and I switched parties. And that one step right there cost me everything, you know?
So how did you find yourself at a freedom, liberty loving organization like AFP?
Oh man, when I left the Democratic Party and I switched to Republican Party in Philadelphia, and I was so emotional, I will say. At that time, I was very emotional and I was pissed. I was angry.
Sure.
And, I told them, I said, y'all going down now because you mess with the wrong one, because you have real people out here that are serious about the activism work that we do. We put our hearts in it, many of us, and then you go and you try to control us and make us do things that we don't want to do. And it's not cool. And so I switched parties. And I was looking for a job, though, because I didn't have any income, And my one friend I reached out to, she was a Republican. She's a Republican. Well, no, she just switched, though, to independent. But I called her. I said, Judge, you hiring? Because she worked in City Hall. She's a judge. And she said, nah. She said, but, call my ex-husband, Roz. He might be able to get you in the PHA, Philadelphia Housing Authority. And she said, he might can get you in there. And I said, okay, cool. And I called him. And long story short, this joker, he invited me to a Republican Party meeting. I thought I was going for lunch, but it turns out he invited me to like a little meeting they had with food and everything, but they were vetting candidates to run for city council, 9th District City Council in Philly, which is a stronghold, Democratic stronghold. Our current mayor Sherelle Parker, she's the ward leader for that area, so it's her district. So what he did, because he had already heard my story, he knew how passionate and angry I was, and he knew I could articulate. He used me to stand before the Philadelphia GOP and share my story. And by the time I finished, they asked me would I run for city council for the 9th District. And I said, sure I will, because for me, I was sitting there, I said, oh, we need a balancing of the scales. And I could not understand leaving Georgia and coming back to Philadelphia and the condition of my city looked the way that it did. And I'm thinking to myself, after serving on the Water Authority Board, I understand the money and everything that comes into a city comes into a county, and I understand how that money is supposed to be distributed. And I'm saying to myself, why in the world does Philadelphia still have pockets of its community that looks like this, and those same politicians are in office? So I said, oh, they got to go. So I was pissed, and I was running off emotion. And I let them set me up, David, as a sacrificial lamb. And I jumped out there. I took a step, jumped out there, ran for 9th District City Council. Of course, I lost. But I will say I had 3 weeks to run. I got 8,000 votes. Majority of those votes was Democrat. And because I was going out there knocking doors, I was in people's faces. They didn't know who I was. I had the ability to recruit and to do my own thing. I knew how to run a machine, And so I ain't had no signs or anything, but I was going to the churches. I was showing up at events. Eventually, they took the mic. They wouldn't let me speak because here I was, a Black woman. And then I was not a Democrat. That was a problem for them, and so I didn't care though. I was going toe to toe. I'm a totally different person than I was when I first switched. I promise you I was, because I was moving out of anger. But I did pretty good, and so they asked me to run for the general because that was a special election.
Oh. And
so, but during that time, I was running for the general, getting to your question. I met a gentleman. We were out there knocking doors. He used to work for AFP. And he saw me on the doors, and he saw how I was doing with the people. And he was like, yo, you're pretty good at this. And so I began to share with him, where I come from and my background, and that this is what I do. I love engaging people at the doors. I have a way of influencing others. And so he looked at me and he said, you would be great to work with Americans for Prosperity. He said, you heard of them? I said, no, I've never heard of AFP. And when he told me about AFP, I said, oh my God. I said, yes, it sounds like I met my people. And I say that because he said, we do policy work. He said, we knock doors, and he said, but we promote good policy. And I was like, good. I said, so it's not really about a candidate, because at this point I was a little burnt out with politicians.
Sure.
You understand?
They'll do that to you.
Oh my God, they burn you out for real. That's why I say I don't want to be. Now, people have asked me 1,000 times, you don't want to run? You don't want to run? Nah, I'm good. I'm good on the sideline. And but with that said, he had me so hyped up about AFP, because when I was running for Philly, when I ran in Philly for 9th District City Council, and I learned that, it was a bunch of uniparty stuff going on, the Republicans sell out to the Democrats and all that. I don't have time for that. I'm a very principled person. I'm not perfect, but I am principled. I have ethics. I have good work ethics. I say what I mean what I say. And I don't like the shady stuff that be going on behind the scene. So I was burnt out. And I was so excited when he told me about AFP. So he arranged for me to go meet our former state director, who's our regional vice president, Ashley Klinger-Smith, and Emily and all the rest of them were there, Mary Beth, and they were all doing a protest. Joe Biden was coming to town. And so they were protesting, and they invited me to come join them, and I did. And I was out there with them holding up signs and stuff. And I just remember that day I said, Lord, I met my people, because I just believe in what we're about, fighting for the right thing, fighting for good policy, and working alongside with those legislators that push the right thing. And so that's how I got here in AFP, and it'll be 3 years next month.
That's wonderful. Well, it's been a storied 3 years. You've done some pretty amazing work and been recognized for it. And, everyone at AFP knows who Roz is, because you've done some amazing work. So tell me about, you're one of the most successful grassroots engagement directors, which in our company are the community organizers.
Yeah, thank you.
Leaders in their neck of the woods, really. And really the lifeblood of our organization. Without our grassroots engagement directors, AFP doesn't really have its identity of a grassroots advocacy organization.
Thank you.
So tell me how you do it. And then, and more specifically, since you're talking about kind of one small step, how you encourage people to take that first action to get involved. Because there's such a kind of a barrier to entrance in a way. People are like, they sit on their couch, yell at their TV, but they don't go and do anything about it 9 out of 10 times. There's probably people listening right now who totally fit that category. How do you help people overcome that? Okay, well, I'll say for myself, I got the job with AFP, and I say this, I never forget. My first day was at All Staff in Florida, and what a first day that was. But long story short, before we left that week, when the trip was over, we had a meeting with our current Dogo at the time. I'll never forget, he looked at us and he was telling the team, he said, I know you guys this and that, but he said, but you guys are not meeting your numbers. And I remember I said, oh, that will never be the case again. Not as long as I'm on this team. I said, and I was joking with him, but I said, they call me the crusher. I said, so you will never tell that to Team PA again. That's why I got my own sweatshirt made called Team PA all day. You understand? And so, because as of late, yes, we're always on leaderboard, right? Rather it's me or rather it's somebody else on the team. And so one way is because I believe in what I do. And so one way you get people to get involved is you're like a salesperson. You're selling yourself. You're selling whatever it is that you're about. And so most people understand, because I'm serious about what I am, they buy into it. Really, it just take me to ask one conversation. Sometimes you gotta, what would be the word, Father? Like, you gotta court them a little bit. Yeah. Some people you definitely have to court a little bit to get them to understand the importance of them getting involved. For instance, I was telling you before we even got started that, I have a young lady that I met at an event, and I was sharing about Americans for Prosperity and what we're about. And I was hiring at the time for grassroots associates.
And she had never been involved in politics. She had a little podcast or whatever, but she had never been involved in politics. And so I met with her that night. And I said, I scheduled a one-on-one. And I got involved with her. She got involved. And I said, well, I will need you to knock doors. She was like, I never knocked doors before. I never. And we were knocking doors for Senator Dave McCormick now, that he is now. And I said, just go out with me. I said, just give me 2 hours, come out with me and see what it's about, see if you like it. And she did. And, she became so well at it. She became one of my grassroots managers, because once my team grew past 50 GAs, I needed help. Mm-hmm. And so I was able to train grassroots managers. I was able to duplicate myself so that they could start bringing the people in the room and stuff like that. And so she did. And, David, this whole month, really since leading up to the primary, she's running for office now, and I sit back and I'm watching her, on social media, and I'm watching her out there like a champion, like she a pro. She taking it to the street. She's doing the things that we taught her and showed her how to do, because those were not things that she was doing prior to her engaging with us. And so the one small step that we've taken and getting involved, honing in on our skills and our ability, it has caused other people to take one small step. And that one small step, we're watching her teach others how to take one small step. And that's just actually what has happened. We've gotten people involved because we're not afraid to ask people, and everybody that I meet is an activist. Mm-hmm. They just don't know it yet. And that's always been the approach that I've taken. It doesn't matter where I go. If I'm at the nail shop, if I'm at the hair salon, I strike up a conversation with anyone and everyone to see where their head is at. And then I began to share my story about the importance of the time that we're living in and what this country is about, and how we need everybody to do something to help save America right now, because America's in trouble. And most people think it's just a game, but it's not, and I must interject and say, as a woman of faith, I know that, God's hand is on me to do just what I'm doing. And so that's why I take it so serious, serious like I do.
Yeah. Well, I think that there's a lot of people on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. There's when you look back to our founding, mm-hmm. 1776, that whole time period, the number of people in the colonies was so small compared mm-hmm. to where we're at right now. But the number of people as a percentage of that population that were involved mm-hmm. in the revolution was such a big percentage, mm-hmm. And then not to mention you had a whole section that were allied with the British. So right. You had just really a relatively small group of people, but the percentage of activism, mm-hmm. which eventually became armed revolution, was so pronounced and big. Mm-hmm. And it's, I kind of wonder, man, if we could touch off that kind of, that fire, that, getting people involved to that degree. I think one of the most important things that you're providing, and that I think AFP at its best provides people, is kind of strength in numbers. Mm-hmm. When you have other people going out alongside you mm-hmm. to make their voice heard, whether it's meeting with a legislator, knocking on doors, standing at an event or a protest. Sometimes it takes a little bit of courage. And for some people, it's just outside of their comfort zone. Mm-hmm. But they do it alongside other people who they bonded with and that they have like-minded, that they're like-minded with. Mm-hmm. It allows them to take that step and right. puts them in that cycle, hopefully, of continuing to increase their contribution. Yeah. So how do you, when you encounter somebody who mm-hmm. is a little scared, they might have the values mm-hmm. and might be concerned about, the course of the nation or state. How do you address that?
Okay. So similar to what you just said is giving people ease. So, inviting people out, inviting people around with you, letting them see what you do, showing them how you do it, and then evaluating them and seeing how they feel, not just throwing people out there and then leaving them out there, but you gotta walk with them a little bit and help them to feel good about what it is that they're doing. I have one gentleman that I met, Brian. He was a libertarian. He's still a libertarian. I met him at an event. And, they thought they was going to sway me, but we went in and we swayed up and we recruited him. And I remember we took him out, to have lunch or whatever, and we were talking, and, he was like, I got to, I'm going to have to get back to you because this is outside of, what he's done and, blah, blah, whatever. But eventually he came around and he called me and he said, I'm going to give it a try, whatever. And he did. And so just at PLC, our Pennsylvania Leadership Conference, he was at the leadership conference working his own table. He's a field manager now for another organization that's similar to Americans for Prosperity. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at him like, that's my baby.
Yeah.
Right? Because he had never tabled. He had never set up events. He definitely was not no field manager knowing how to go out and win elections and set up days of action or whatever they calling it, that other organization. But today I sat there and I looked at him. He got his pin on. He proud. And I said, that's my son. That's my son politically. Nice. And I say that because, I never had any natural children, but I have spiritual children from the ministry work that I've done in church. And I sit back. I've been sitting back all month looking and saying, yo, you got a lot of political children too.
Yeah.
You got a lot of children that you have birthed out into civic engagement through my story, through my own testimony, right? But then also, through the educational events that we host with Americans for Prosperity, right? We're able to go out and set up events that educate people, and it educates people about what's going on, and we give them and share with them ways that they can get involved. And plenty of people they've joined the cause just because of that. They placed me in my area is Southeast Pennsylvania that I cover. And so that's 5 different counties. And a lot of times, they say, yeah, Roz is from Philly. And I'll be like, yeah, but I cover all 5 because, I never took my eye off the prize. Yeah, I'm stationed in Philly, but I got Bucks, I got Delaware, I got Montgomery County, and I got Chester County, right? And so they saw that at the A250 event, right? Because the weather was bad, so we had weather against us. But my people still showed up. And they showed up not just from Philly, but they showed up from all 5 counties. And I can't tell you, David, how many people said, every time we turned around, somebody was like, I'm here because Roz, because I be on them, right? And people show up too because I communicate. Communication has always been key, and so I'm constantly, communicating with my activists. Like you said, you coming and holding people accountable. Like you said, you're going to be there. You coming, you texting. And then I, sometimes I add that personal touch and I call. And I think sometimes that, some people in this kind of work, they don't like people.
That makes it tough work then.
That makes it hard, right?
Yeah.
Like, first of all, you gotta like people. You gotta like people, you know what I mean? And so, and you gotta know where your gift and your skill at. And you can't be somebody that's just talking out both sides of your mouth and don't mean what you say. You gotta be somebody that's solid and somebody that really mean what you're saying in order to get people involved. I got a young lady that is one of my activists down in North Philadelphia, and she's one of my best activists because she had never been involved, like taking her one small step to move the needle towards certain things until she started working with AFP. Like, it makes her feel proud now when she go down to her community and she set up events and she's doing things and she's reaching out to the right people to get resources in her community so that they can achieve the American dream, the children that she loved in her community. That all came from Americans for Prosperity. And so it makes me feel good.
Well, you should be really proud of the work you're doing.
Oh, thank you, David.
And I know you cover more than Philly. Obviously, Philly is one of the toughest places that we've.
Oh my God!
But those counties surrounding it are difficult and swingy, and
yes, they are
vital to the future of Pennsylvania for sure.
Yes, they are.
But that's an important region. You're doing the Lord's work there, and we're so proud that you're on our team.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dave. And I'm just excited to be a part of Americans for Prosperity. I tell people all the time, we put them on the map. We put AFP in Pennsylvania on the map with our grassroots, with the work we did for Senator McCormick's his election. Nobody believed that he was gonna win, but I said, nah, we got it. and we would not let nobody deter us. And we built a machine, and that machine went out and got the victory. Emily Seidel, I have met her at, I had met her prior, but I went to, what was it, Lord? The game. It was the baseball game they had.
The House and Senate.
Yes.
Congressional baseball game.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to attend that game, and she looked at me and she said, "Are we going to do it?" She said, "Are we going to bring it home?" I said, "I'm going to bring it home." I said, Ashley Klingensmith, I said, she asked me, she said, "Roz, can you bring it home for us?" I said, "I'm going to bring it home." And so I always get teary-eyed off that because they meant that from their heart, and I meant it from my heart. And we got the victory.
Yes, you did. Well,
yeah.
I look forward to more victories. So, Roz, thanks so much for joining us and for all the work that you're doing. You're an inspiration to so many of our. Yeah, it's funny when we come to these all-staff meetings, you forget how many new people there are.
Yes.
There's constantly new people coming in. It's always a big percentage of the people here.
Yes.
And so to have people like you, for them to learn from and to look up to is so important. And you might not always feel that, but it's actually a real reality. So we're so glad you could tell your story here with us.
Thank you, David. And I want to thank the American Potential Podcast for having me on. I want to thank your team for reaching out to me. Everything was done lovely. And I hope I gave you all what you asked for.
You're wonderful. Thanks, Roz.
All right,
appreciate it. Well, folks, if you enjoyed this podcast and want to learn more about us, feel free to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Find us on Facebook or Instagram. And also, remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take them for granted. Go out there and defend liberty and freedom. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.